All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our third and final day of talking about World War II. Today we'll be talking about the Holocaust and other crimes against humanity. So, first, we need to talk about why the Holocaust was even happening. Where did this way of thinking come from? And where it comes from is basically the Nazi belief in Ehrenvolk, Master Race, the Aryans, these people who are quote unquote supermen, like they're uh, pure genealogy, and everybody who is not an Aryan is an Untermenschen, which is a subhuman. These are Jews, these are the Roma or Gypsies, people who are homosexuals, people who have birth defects, people who are mentally handicapped, all these groups that are deemed as quote unquote undesirable. All right. There's also this belief in eugenics, which is a pseudoscience or a science that doesn't have a lot of plausibility to it. So basically, like, strong people should breed with strong people so that they have strong children. Um, it doesn't believe in more of the luck of the draw, which is really what happens with birth. And also it has a belief in social Darwinism. All right. If you think of Darwin, what do you think of? The evolutionary theory, survival of the fittest. Social Darwinism is the same concept but applied to civilizations. So only the strong civilizations will survive. The ones that are weak will die by the wayside. All right. Now, there's going to be a lot of persecution of Jews in the 30s and especially the 40s in Germany and in the territories that will be conquered by the Nazis. So one of the first big things that happens that's a major signal for Jews to try and get out if they can is Kristallnacht, Night of the Broken Glass. This is when Jewish-owned businesses and synagogues, their temples, are attacked. Some are burned to the ground, and just open brutality towards the Jews is being sanctioned by the government. All right, like here is a synagogue that was burned out. So here's basically a little timeline showing how things are progressively getting worse and worse. From 33 to 35, Jews are being publicly humiliated. A lot of them are losing their jobs and they're having to do menial labor just to get by, and people are just making fun of them and abusing them in such ways for it. All right. They lose their citizenship of the country that they were born and raised in just because they're Jewish, and they're being forced to move into ghettos. A ghetto is basically what it is: low income housing where people are basically living in close quarters to each other, not the best sanitation, not the best utilities like electric and running water. They're basically being forced to live in the slums. Then we get Kristallnacht, which I already talked about. And then we're starting to get people forcibly being removed even from the ghettos and start being sent to concentration camps. Not the death camps, concentration camps. Basically, we're going to keep an eye on you in here behind a fence under armed guard until we decide what to do with you. All right, so here's some examples of the public humiliation: being forced to scrub the sidewalk. Also, badges. Jews were forced to wear the Star of David as a badge on their clothing, and if they didn't, they could face severe fines and beatings and penalties of all kinds for not showing that they are a Jew. Now, let's get to the Holocaust proper. 1942, at the Wannsee Conference, the final solution to the Jewish question is being, quote unquote, answered. So the ghettos are being emptied out and Jews are being moved to extermination camps. So this map, you may want to pause this and take a closer look at it, but basically a lot of the death camps are in Poland, and we have a lot of concentration camps, which are the black dots scattered all over the place. And the red dots, those are big transport cities, the transit cities. All right. And if you can see in the east, the closer you get to Russia, the Red Skull and Crossbones, that's where a lot of massacres took place. The massacres of Jews and Slavic peoples. All right. Now, as the war's going on, we're pushing the Germans out of territory. We're starting to find things. And these things are camps where there are just piles of dead bodies all over the place. We've got people who are malnourished, basically looking like walking skeletons because they haven't been fed in days, if not weeks. A lot of them would die just because of how malnourished they are, but a number of people would recover. And here we go. One of the most notorious concentration camps / death camps was Auschwitz. This one was basically like a factory of death. You know, the train that brought Jewish people here went right into the camp where they would unload off of boxcars. A number of them would see this gate, Arbeit macht frei, which means work sets you free. Very ironic because most people who were there did not make it out alive. They would have to walk down corridors like this where there's barbed wire everywhere. You were stripped of your identity. You were put into basically a prison uniform. Heads would be shaved. You'd be beaten. You'd be starved, exposed to the cold. You know, starvation, very, very prominent. See these guys there, basically just skeletons that are alive. Right? Mass graves. Some of these would be from the concentration camps. Some of them would be from those massacres I mentioned earlier. Like these pictures are from mass executions and massacres that happened against the Slavic people. Like that picture that is on the left, those German soldiers there, they are part of a group that is called the Einsatzgruppen, which is basically Hitler's death squads. These were squads of soldiers that would go out, they would take Jewish prisoners and Slavic prisoners, and they would just machine gun them, execute them by firing squad, all of that stuff. That left picture, I forget the name of the town, but it's called The Last Jew of blank, like whatever the name of that town was. All right. Now, because of places like Auschwitz being a death factory, they started looking for faster ways of getting rid of bodies. So they started to use crematoria, where they would just, they take, all right, here's the cycle of how things would work. You're in a boxcar, which is, those cars that are attached in trains. And you might have 150 people in a single boxcar. Everybody's crammed in there like sardines. You can't move, you can't breathe because there's so much humidity in the air because of all the bodies and all the heat and everything. You get to your destination, which you don't know where that is, and you have men with guns and attack dogs and everything filing you out when you get there, separating men and women and children all from each other, and taking your possessions that you do have, like if you have a suitcase or a bag, they're taking it. And then sometimes you get to go take a shower, you get your prison clothes, and you just go to wherever they tell you you're going to be staying until they decide what they're doing with you. Other times, not so lucky. When you get to that shower, instead of turning on water, that might actually turn on the poison gases and just kill everybody who's in the shower. And then they strip you of all your valuables. If you have any gold teeth from dentistry work being done, they're going to take a hammer and chisel and knock it out of your teeth so they can use the gold. And barrels of tooth gold was actually recovered by American troops, like during the war. So we know that this happened. Then those dead bodies would be taken to the crematoria and burned until they're nothing but ash. And then the ash would just be thrown outside in the mud to get ready for the next body to be incinerated. And these crematoria would just be, they'd be working around the clock nonstop. burning and disposing of bodies. Now, the victims. Here's a nice long list of them. We have the Jews, obviously, any enemies of the state, meaning political enemies. The Roma, they're the gypsies, anyone who's mentally or physically disabled, homosexuals, Soviet prisoners of war, Jehovah's Witnesses, even some Catholics, criminals, basically any, and all these people had a badge that they could be identified by, right? And about 12 million people were killed just in the Holocaust, half of which were Jews. Here's some examples of what those badges are. Of course, the yellow star being for Jews, different color for a different type of person. If there's a bar involved, it means that they are repeat offenders of something. Like if you were caught doing stuff multiple times, you get a bar plus your triangle. All right. So that's what the Germans were up to. So now what were the Japanese doing? First, last time I mentioned the Bataan Death March. So what this was is thousands of U.S. soldiers were taken captive when the Philippines were conquered by the Japanese. We weren't able to get all of our guys out. General MacArthur, he had to flee. He took as many men as he could, and the men that were left behind, he basically made a vow to them, like, I'll be back for you guys. So what these men then had to suffer was daily beatings and starvation. They were forced to march miles through jungle, and they were placed into, it was either 3 or 4 prison camps that were designed to hold a lot fewer men than they had prisoners. And on the way to these camps, if you resisted in any way, if you fell behind, if you got tired, if you complained, if you looked at a guard the wrong way, you were dead. They would stab you, they would shoot you, they'd cut your head off, and sometimes they'd even just pull a guy out at random and just kill him just for the fun of it. So that's a Bataan Death March. We have no idea how many American and Filipino soldiers were killed on this march. It could be just several thousand, or it could be 5,000, it could be 10,000. We don't know what the number is of how many men were actually killed on the Death March. Of course, there's the rape of Nanjing, which was mentioned, last time. So I'm not going to go into that again. But now there's Unit 731. This was basically their chemical weapons development branch of the military. This unit basically did illegal, horrible human experimentations, and this is some of the worst criminal offenses that happened during the war. Because, there would be chemical burns and all sorts of painful things being done to people experimenting wise. And it was just brutal, brutal stuff. So once Germany and Japan are defeated, the leaders and criminals would all be going on trial. So first we have Nuremberg. Now this city was definitely put on for why it would be held here, because Nuremberg was a city that was used by Hitler for a lot of early on rallies to gain support for the Nazis. So like the birth of the Nazi Party being in Nuremberg, and the final nail in the coffin in Nuremberg. All right. And then we have the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal, where a lot of the leading officials would answer for their crimes, such as the atrocities in China and Unit 731, all of that. Guys like Hideki Tojo here, executed by hanging. And like the guys here in Nuremberg, most of them would be executed for their crimes. Others would get life imprisonment and things like that. All right, so that is basically going to wrap up World War II. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned a lot, and I will see you next time.